Welcome to RSIT Online. I am Nikhila Bhuvan, Assistant Professor, Department of IT, Rajagiri School of Engineering and Technology. I am here to handle web application development for IT students of semester 7. Before moving on to the subject, let's discuss about the course objective. The course objective, which is given in the syllabus of web application development, are: it gives an insight of internet programming for designing and implementation of web-based applications, to develop code to handle exceptions and validate data for file and database storage. It also gives an insight of the recent platforms that is being used in web application development, such as J2EE, XML, JSP, etc. And the subjects conclude with giving an idea of Java beans. So now let's move on to the part 1 of Module 1, which deals with web architecture, web application lifecycle, XML and J2EE. So let's have a look into the web generations or evolutions of web. The web evolution started with Web 1.0, where the users were very passive, who were not allowed or who were not given an opportunity to post reviews or comments. And the next generation is Web 2.0, which encourages participation, collaboration, and information sharing, like what you can do in YouTube, Flickr, and all the social media websites. Now we are in the path of moving on to Web 3.0. In Web 3.0, computers can interpret information like human and intelligently generate and distribute useful content tailored to the needs of the users. Let's discuss some of the common terminologies that come up in web application development. A web application is an application accessible from the web. The World Wide Web is a collection of documents and services distributed across the Internet and linked together by hyperlinks. The web is therefore a subset of Internet. All the web applications are run and are created on servers. A web server is a program that uses HTTP, that is the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, to serve the files that forms the web pages in response to the request, which are forwarded by their computer's HTTP client. Some of the common examples for web servers are Apache Tomcat, Microsoft Internet Information Server, that is IIS server, Light TPD, Google Web Servers, GWS, etc. The primary function of a web server is to store, process, and deliver web pages to clients. The communication between client and the server takes place using the HTTP protocol. HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. This protocol is used to provide the communication between the client and the server. The client always requests the server for any service, and the server provides response back to the client to that request. HTTP protocol is very useful for web applications. Web servers can respond to the client request in either of the following two possible ways: generating response by using the script and communicating with database, sending files to the clients associated with the requested URL. The block diagram representation of web server is shown. Here you can see the web client request using HTTP request, and the server can provide both static and dynamic response using HTTP response. A web application is a client-server application that uses the web browser as its client. The browsers send requests to the servers, and the servers generate responses and returns them to the browser. There are important advantages in using web servers as clients. The first one is the web browser is ubiquitous. And the second one is the web browsers provide mechanisms to securely download and execute more complex clients. A web application architecture is a framework that is comprised of relationships and interaction between application components such as middleware systems, user interfaces, and databases. A web application architecture can be defined with these processes. A user browser for a specific URL which the browser locates and requests. Over the network, data is sent from the server to the browser, then executed by the browser so that it is able to display the requested page. The user views and interacts with the page. The flow of control in a typical web application is shown in the figure. Below the line represents the web server portion and above the line is the web application portion. You can see below the line we'll be having accessing and modifying the contents of the databases, customizing the contents and presenting it to the user. The major web servers present in the market is given in this slide. An application server is a server program in a computer in a distributed network that provides the business logic for an application program. The basic difference between a web server and an application server is given. You can see that the web server will be providing a static content, whereas the application server will provide a dynamic content. Both works on HTTP protocol. Web server serves web-based application, and the application servers can serve both the web and enterprise-based application. Web servers only support servlets in JSP, and the application support distributed transaction and EJBs. Interaction between the browser and the server is not all there is to in a web application. The web server themselves operates as a client when they interact with other backend servers, including databases and legacy systems. So, any web application can be called as a multi-tier architecture. In multi-tier applications, each tier represents an application layer. A multi-tier architecture tries to separate the components into different layers. There are basically three types of web application architecture: one tier, two tier, and three tier. In one-tier architecture, all the three layers are on the same machine. All codes and processing are kept on the single machine. That is, the three tiers are the presentation tier, the data access tier, and the business logic tier. The main disadvantage of a single tier architecture is its scalability, portability, and maintenance. The three different tiers which are there present in any web applications are the business logic tier, which manages the communication between an user interface and the databases, the data access tier, which contains a method to connect with the databases and prefer, insert, update, and delete from and to the database, and the presentation tier, which contains the UI part of an application. The second type of architecture that a web application follows is a two-tier architecture, where the databases run on the server and the presentation logic and the business logic runs on the client. The presentation and the logic layers are tightly connected. The main disadvantages of this two-tier architecture are the heavy load on the server, potential congestion on the network, and the presentation still tied to the business logic. The last and the most common type of architecture which is followed by the web applications are the three-tier architecture, where each layer, the presentation layer, the business layer, and the data access layer or the data access logic layer lies on different machines. Advantages of a three-tier architecture are its high performance, its high degree of flexibility in deployment, its better reusability, its improved data integrity and security, and it is easy to maintain and modify. The disadvantage is its complexity. The basic requirements of a web architecture are: first one, its speed to compute. It should be faster in responding to the client request. Second one, it's service available. It should be available 24 by 7. The next one is connecting to the existing data. That is, it should be able to connect to the database as soon as possible and get back the response to the users. The fourth requirement is the expanded user definition, which means that the access should be there provided during their commute and might continue through the work days and while traveling to remote business sites. The fifth one is flexible user interaction, which means that it should support both static templates as well as dynamic HTML generation. And the last one is a flexible business component, which enables a simplified approach to multi-tier application development, concealing application complexity and enabling the component development to focus on business logic. The main phases of a web-based application are developing the components, assembling the components, deploying the components, and testing and validating and doing the failover mechanisms. The process of creating, deploying, and executing a web application can be summarized as follows. Develop the web component code, develop the web application deployment descriptor, compile the web application components and helper classes referenced by the components, optimally pack the application into a deployable unit, deploy the application into a web container, access a URL that references the web application. XML and J2EE are the two main languages that helps for the development of a web-based application. XML mainly deals with the transferring of the data and J2EE deals with developing and deploying the web-based applications at the server side. XML is a simple text-based language which was designed to store and transport data in plain text format. It stands for Extensible Markup Language. XML is mainly used to describe the data, XML documents possible to maintain text-based databases. XML was designed to store and transport data from one application to another application. XML simplifies data sharing, it simplifies data transportation, and simplifies platform changes. J2EE is a short form of Java Enterprise Edition. Java Enterprise Edition was proposed by Sun Microsystems for developing and deploying multi-tier distributed enterprise business application. Electronic data exchange of non-standard data formats requires developers to build proprietary parsers for each data format. XML technology eliminates this requirement by using a standard XML parser. An XML parser can immediately provide some content validation by ensuring that all the required fields are provided and are in the correct order. This function, however, requires the availability of a DTD. It helps in the electronic data interchange and enterprise application integration. Roles played in developing a web application are J2EE product provider, application component provider, application assembler, deployer, and a system administrator tool provider. Support of model view controller is a benefit provided by J2EE application. The MVC architecture is a way to divide functionality involved in maintaining and presenting data. The figure depicts the MVC architecture followed by a web application. The simplified component-based development model is another benefit offered by J2EE platform. Because J2EE applications are component-based, they can be reused in multiple applications, saving time and effort and enables quick delivery of applications. As the components can be updated and replaced immediately, new functionality can be shimmed into existing applications simply by updating the second component. This is another benefit of J2E platform. J2EE Web Containers provide a runtime support for responding to client requests, performing request time processing, and returning result to the client. The component-based architecture is another benefit offered by J2EE application. J2EE Client Tier provides support for a variety of client type both within the enterprise firewalls and outside. The clients can be offered through web browsers by using plain HTML pages or dynamic HTML pages generated with Java Server Pages technology or Java Applet. Another benefit offered by J2EE platform is the support for business logic component. So to conclude with the J2EE applications, we can tell that it runs on three tiers. The three tiers are the client tier, the middle tier, and the enterprise information tier. The three kinds of J2EE modules are web module, EJB module, and an application client module. In this presentation, we have dealt with part 1 of module 1. The topics discussed were basics of web applications and its definition, web application life cycle, web application architecture, the 1-tier, 2-tier, and the 3-tier architecture, XML and J2EE, roles played by a J2EE developer, and the different modules in a J2EE web application. Hope you have followed it, and thank you for being with me.